The shrill scream pierced the tranquil suburban air, shattering the peace of the quiet cul-de-sac. Karen, the self-appointed HOA president, stood on her manicured lawn, her perfectly coiffed hair now in disarray as she frantically waved her arms. "Help! Someone, please help me!" she cried, her high-pitched voice carrying across the neighborhood. Neighbors peeked out from behind curtains, wondering what could have possibly provoked such a commotion from the usually composed Karen. Unbeknownst to the frazzled woman, her neighbor, Officer Jack Wilson, was already on the scene, having been the first to respond to the distress call. As an undercover cop, he had a vested interest in keeping the peace within the community, even if it meant dealing with a temperamental HOA president. "What seems to be the problem, Mime?" Jack asked, his calm demeanor a stark contrast to Karen's frantic state. Karen's eyes widened as she recognized the officer, her cheeks flushing with embarrassment. "Officer Wilson, thank goodness you're here. Well, I've locked myself out of my house, and I can't get back in. Can you please help me?" Jack fought the urge to chuckle at the irony of the situation. The woman who had made his life a living hell with her endless complaints and demands for conformity was now at his mercy. "Of course, Mime. Let's see what we can do." As Jack approached the front door, Karen hovered nearby, wringing her hands nervously. "Please hurry. I have an important meeting with the other HOA board members in an hour, and I can't be late." Jack paused, considering the best course of action. He could easily have the door unlocked in a matter of minutes. But a part of him was tempted to prolong the situation, just to see the ever-composed Karen squirm. Deciding to take the high road, Jack set to work, carefully examining the lock and considering his options. After a few tense moments, he produced a slim metal tool and deftly maneuvered it into the lock, turning it with a satisfying click. Karen let out a sigh of relief as the door swung open, revealing the pristine interior of her immaculate home. "Thank you, Officer Wilson. I don't know what I would have done without you." Jack nodded, his eyes gleaming with a hint of amusement. "It's no trouble at all, Mime. I'm just glad I could be of assistance." As Karen stepped inside, she paused and turned to face the officer, her brow furrowed in thought. "You know, Officer Wilson, I've always thought you were a bit of a troublemaker in this neighborhood. But today, you proved yourself to be quite helpful. Perhaps we've misjudged you." Jack suppressed a smile, knowing full well that the HOA president's opinion of him was likely to change again in the near future. "I'm just doing my job, Mime. I'm here to serve and protect the community, regardless of who I'm dealing with." Karen nodded, her expression softening slightly. "Well, I appreciate it, and I'll be sure to mention your assistance to the other board members. Perhaps we can put aside our differences and work together more closely in the future." With a final nod, Karen disappeared into her home, leaving Jack standing on the doorstep, shaking his head in amusement. As he turned to leave, he couldn't help but wonder how long the newfound camaraderie would last. As Karen hurried through her front door, she cast a quick glance at the clock on the wall, her eyes widening in alarm. "Oh no, I'm running late," she exclaimed, quickly smoothing her hands over her perfectly pressed blouse and skirt. Rushing into the kitchen, she grabbed her purse and car keys, mentally running through the list of items she needed to discuss at the upcoming HOA board meeting. "Okay, let's see. New fence regulations, the issue with the Sanders' overgrown lawn, and that pesky complaint about the Johnsons' RV parked in their driveway," she muttered under her breath. Karen took a deep breath, trying to regain her composure before facing her fellow HOA board members. "I can't afford any slip-ups today. This meeting is crucial for maintaining order in our neighborhood," she said aloud, as if reminding herself of the importance of the task at hand. With a determined nod, Karen strode out the door, locking it behind her. As she hurried to her car, she couldn't help but glance back at Officer Wilson, who was still standing on her front step, watching her with an amused expression. "Thank you again, officer," she called out, her tone a bit more civil than usual. "I'll be sure to mention your assistance at the meeting." Jack simply nodded in response, and Karen quickly got into her car, pulling out of the driveway with a sense of urgency. As she navigated the familiar streets, her mind raced, mentally rehearsing the points she wanted to make during the meeting. Upon arriving at the HOA community center, Karen took a deep breath and straightened her shoulders, determined to project an air of confidence and authority. As she pushed open the doors, she was greeted by the familiar faces of the other board members, all of whom turned to face her expectantly. "Ah, Karen, so glad you could join us," said the treasurer, Mrs. Thompson, with a hint of sarcasm in her voice. "We were just about to start without you." Karen bristled at the slight, but quickly smoothed her features into a polite smile. "My apologies, everyone. I had a bit of a situation at home, but I'm here now and ready to get started." The other board members exchanged glances, but remained silent as Karen took her seat at the head of the table. As she began to outline the agenda, she couldn't help but feel a twinge of unease, knowing that the meeting was likely to be a fiery one. The HOA board meeting was in full swing, and Karen was doing her best to maintain control of the proceedings. She had presented her proposed fence regulations and was now fielding a barrage of questions and concerns from the other members. "These new regulations are far too restrictive," Mrs. Thompson argued, her arms crossed defiantly. "Homeowners should have the freedom to choose their own fence designs, as long as they maintain the property value." Karen pursed her lips, her grip tightening on the papers in front of her. "The purpose of these regulations is to ensure a cohesive and well-maintained aesthetic throughout the neighborhood. Allowing homeowners to do as they please would only lead to disarray and decrease property values." The discussion quickly devolved into a heated debate, with the other board members chiming in with their own opinions and concerns. Karen found herself growing increasingly frustrated, her carefully prepared talking points seemingly falling on deaf ears. "This is precisely why we need these regulations in place," she insisted, her voice rising in volume. "Without a clear set of guidelines, the neighborhood will descend into chaos. Surely you all can see the benefits of maintaining the unified, visually appealing community." The other board members exchanged skeptical glances, and Karen could feel the tension in the room mounting. Just as she was about to launch into another impassioned argument, a soft knock at the door interrupted the proceedings. All eyes turned to the door as it slowly opened, revealing the familiar face of Officer Wilson. Karen's breath caught in her throat, a flicker of panic crossing her features. "Excuse me, everyone," Jack said, his voice calm and steady. "I'm sorry to interrupt, but I wanted to speak with Karen about a matter I believe is of importance to the community." The other board members murmured amongst themselves, casting curious glances in Karen's direction. Karen, for her part, felt a sense of dread wash over her, wondering what the officer could possibly want to discuss. "Of course, Officer Wilson," she responded, trying to keep her tone neutral. "Please come in and have a seat." As Jack entered the room and settled into the empty chair next to Karen, the board members fell silent, all eyes trained on the unexpected guest. "Thank you for your time," Jack began, his gaze sweeping across the room. "I'm here to discuss a matter that I believe is directly relevant to the work of this HOA board." Karen swallowed hard, her mind racing as she tried to anticipate what the officer might say. The tension in the room was palpable as Officer Wilson addressed the HOA board members. Karen sat rigidly in her seat, her heart pounding in her chest, wondering what sort of news the officer could possibly have that would be relevant to their meeting. "As you all know, I've been an active member of this community for some time now," Jack began, his tone measured and professional. "And in that time, I've noticed a concerning trend of petty disputes and complaints that have been brought to the HOA's attention." Karen felt her stomach twist into knots, knowing that she had been at the center of many of those disputes. She glanced nervously at the other board members, who were listening intently, their expressions a mix of curiosity and apprehension. "Now, I understand the importance of maintaining a well-kept and orderly neighborhood," Jack continued, "but I've also witnessed the toll that these disputes can take on the residents, both emotionally and financially." He paused, his gaze settling on Karen. "Which is why I believe it's time for the HOA to adopt a more proactive approach to conflict resolution." Karen's brow furrowed, and she opened her mouth to interject, but Jack raised his hand, silencing her. "I propose that the HOA board considers implementing a mediation program, where residents can come together to discuss and resolve their differences in a constructive manner, with the guidance of a neutral third party. The other board members began murmuring amongst themselves, their expressions thoughtful. Karen, on the other hand, felt a growing sense of unease. She had always relied on the HOA's strict enforcement of the rules to maintain control over the neighborhood, and the thought of a more collaborative approach was unsettling. Officer Wilson, that's an interesting suggestion, Mrs. Thompson said, her tone cautious. But how would such a program be implemented, and who would be responsible for overseeing it? Jack nodded, as if anticipating the question. Well, I'm glad you asked. I've been in touch with a local mediation firm that has experience working with HOAs, and they've expressed a willingness to provide their services at a discounted rate. Karen's eyes widened, and she leaned forward in her seat. Discounted rate? And who exactly would be footing the bill for this mediation program? Jack met her gaze evenly. The HOA, of course. I believe it's a worthwhile investment in the long-term well-being of our community. The other board members murmured in agreement, and Karen felt a growing sense of unease. This was not the direction she had envisioned for the HOA, and she couldn't help but wonder what ulterior motives the officer might have. As the discussion surrounding Officer Wilson's mediation proposal continued, Karen found herself growing increasingly agitated. The other board members seemed intrigued by the idea, and she could sense the tide turning against her position. I'm not sure I understand the need for such a program, she interjected, her voice shook. The HOA's current system of enforcing the covenants and bylaws has worked just fine for years. Why fix what isn't broken? The other board members exchanged glances, and Mrs. Thompson cleared her throat. Karen, with all due respect, I think we've all witnessed the negative consequences of your heavy-handed approach to enforcement. This mediation program could be a way to foster more cooperation and understanding within the community. Karen felt her cheeks flush with indignation. Cooperation and understanding. This isn't some hippie commune, Mrs. Thompson. We're talking about maintaining the integrity and property values of our neighborhood, and that requires a firm hand. The room fell silent, and Karen could feel the weight of the other board members' disapproving stares. Officer Wilson, on the other hand, remained calm and composed, his gaze steady. "Can't understand your concerns, Karen," he said, his tone conciliatory. "But I truly believe that a more collaborative approach could benefit everyone in the long run. Mediation allows residents to have a voice and work through their differences in a constructive way, rather than resorting to confrontation and escalation." Karen crossed her arms over her chest, her lips pressed into a thin line. "And what exactly qualifies you to make such a recommendation, Officer Wilson? Last I checked, you weren't even a member of this board." Jack nodded, acknowledging her point. "You're absolutely right, Karen. I'm not a member of the HOA board, and I don't have a vote in your decisions. But as a member of this community, and as a law enforcement officer, I've seen firsthand the impact that these disputes can have, both on the individuals involved and on the overall cohesion of the neighborhood." He paused, his gaze sweeping across the room. "And I believe that a mediation program, implemented with the guidance of experienced professionals, could go a long way towards preventing these conflicts from escalating and causing further harm." Karen opened her mouth to retort, but the sound of Mrs. Thompson's voice cut her off. "I think Officer Wilson makes a compelling argument," the treasurer said, her expression thoughtful. "Perhaps we should take some time to research this mediation program in more detail and weigh the potential benefits against the costs." The other board members murmured in agreement, and Karen felt a wave of frustration wash over her. This was not the outcome she had envisioned, and she knew that she would have to tread carefully if she wanted to maintain her grip on the HOA. As the HOA board meeting continued, Karen found herself increasingly on the defensive. Officer Wilson's proposal for a mediation program had clearly struck a chord with the other board members, who seemed eager to explore the idea further. "I still have my reservations about this whole thing," Karen said, her voice laced with skepticism. "How can we be sure that this mediation program won't just encourage more frivolous complaints and endless disputes?" Mrs. Thompson fixed Karen with a steady gaze. "That's a valid concern, Karen. But from what Officer Wilson has shared, The mediation process is designed to help residents find mutually agreeable solutions, rather than simply ruling in favor of one side or the other. Karen scoffed, shaking her head. That sounds like a recipe for chaos. The HOA's role is to uphold the community's covenants and bylaws, not to act as some kind of glorified counselor. Officer Wilson raised a hand, cutting off Karen's tirade. I understand your apprehension, Karen. But the goal of mediation isn't to undermine the HOA's authority or ignore the covenants. Rather, it's to provide a constructive forum for residents to address their concerns and find common ground. He paused, his gaze steady. And from what I've seen, a lot of the disputes that end up escalating to the HOA level could have been resolved much earlier if the residents had the opportunity to sit down and really listen to each other. The other board members nodded in agreement, and Karen felt her frustration mounting. She knew that she was rapidly losing control of the situation, and the thought of relinquishing her iron grip on the HOA was deeply unsettling. Well, if this mediation program is going to be implemented, I want to ensure that it's done in a way that aligns with the HOA's standards and priorities, Karen said, her voice firm. Mrs. Thompson nodded. Of course, Karen. I think we all agree that any changes to the HOA's processes should be carefully considered and implemented in a way that maintains the integrity of our community. Karen felt a glimmer of hope. Perhaps she could still steer the conversation in a direction that would preserve her influence and the HOA's authority. In that case, I propose that we form a subcommittee to oversee the development and implementation of this mediation program, she said, her eyes sweeping across the room. And I'd like to be a part of that committee to ensure that the HOA's interests are properly represented. The other board members exchanged glances, and Karen could see the hesitation in their expressions. She steeled herself, prepared to fight for her position with every ounce of her stubborn determination. The HOA board meeting had taken an unexpected turn, with Officer Wilson's proposal for a mediation program sparking a heated debate. As Karen fought to maintain her grip on the proceedings, she could feel the other board members' resistance growing. I'm not sure that's the best approach, Karen, Mrs. Thompson said, her brow furrowed in thought. Given your, shall we say, strong-handed approach to enforcement, I'm not sure your participation on the mediation subcommittee would be viewed as truly impartial. Karen felt her jaw tighten, the muscles in her neck tensing with barely contained fury. Impartial? I've always had the best interests of this community in mind. It's not my fault that some residents can't seem to follow the rules. Officer Wilson cleared his throat, drawing the attention of the room. If I may, I think Mrs. Thompson makes a fair point. The goal of the mediation program is to create a neutral space where residents can feel comfortable expressing their concerns and working towards mutually agreeable solutions. He turned his gaze to Karen, his expression calm and measured. Having the HOA president directly involved in the process could undermine that sense of impartiality and trust. Karen scoffed, unable to contain her indignation. So, what to suggesting that I have no place on this subcommittee? That I'm somehow incapable of being objective? The other board members shifted uncomfortably in their seats, avoiding Karen's accusatory gaze. Mrs. Thompson spoke up, her voice diplomatic. Perhaps it would be best if the subcommittee was comprised of members who aren't directly involved in HOA enforcement. That way, the residents can feel confident that their concerns will be heard and addressed fairly. Karen felt her blood boiling, her fingers clenching the edge of the table. This is outrageous. I'm the HOA president, and I demand to have a say in how this mediation program is implemented. Officer Wilson raised a hand, his expression unperturbed. I understand your concerns, Karen, but the success of this program relies on the trust and cooperation of the residents. On having you directly involved, given your reputation, could undermine that trust. The other board members nodded in agreement, and Karen felt a sinking sensation in the pit of her stomach. She was quickly losing the battle, and the realization that her iron-fisted control over the HOA was slipping through her fingers was almost more than she could bear. With a resigned sigh, Karen leaned back in her chair, her shoulders slumping in defeat. Fine. If that's the way it's going to be, then so be it. But I want regular updates on the subcommittee's progress, and I reserve the right to provide my input. The other board members exchanged relieved glances, and Officer Wilson offered Karen a small, conciliatory smile. "Of course, Karen. We'll be sure to keep you informed every step of the way." As the meeting adjourned, Karen felt a sense of unease wash over her. She couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning of a much larger battle for control, and she was determined to come out on top. As Karen exited the HOA community center, her mind was swirling with a whirlwind of emotions. She felt betrayed, angry, and most of all, deeply unsettled by the direction the board meeting had taken. The proposal for a mediation program, spearheaded by Officer Wilson, had been a direct challenge to her authority as HOA president, and the fact that the other board members seemed willing to back the idea, even going so far as to exclude her from the subcommittee, was a bitter pill to swallow. "This is unacceptable," Karen muttered under her breath, her perfectly manicured nails digging into the palms of her hands. "I won't just sit back and let them undermine everything I've worked so hard to build." As she made her way to her car, a plan began to form in Karen's mind. She knew that she couldn't simply confront the board members head-on. They had made it clear that they didn't trust her to be impartial. No, she would need to take a more subtle approach, one that would allow her to regain control without arousing suspicion. Sliding behind the wheel of her immaculately clean SUV, Karen started the engine and pulled out of the parking lot, her mind racing. She would need to gather more information to understand the full scope of Officer Wilson's involvement and the mediation program's proposed structure. And then, once she had a clearer picture, she would strike. As she navigated the familiar streets back to her house, Karen's expression hardened with determination. She was the HOA president, and she would be damned if she was going to let a meddling cop and a few disgruntled board members undermine her authority. Once she was safely inside her home, Karen immediately set to work, scouring the internet for any information she could find on the mediation firm that Officer Wilson had mentioned. She needed to understand their credentials, their track record, and any potential conflicts of interest that could be exploited. As she delved deeper into her research, a sleazy smile crept across Karen's face. She had always been a master of manipulation, and this situation would be no different. With the right information and the right strategy, she was confident that she could derail the mediation program and reassert her dominance over the HOA. "Just you wait, Officer Wilson," she murmured, her eyes gleaming with a predatory intensity. "You may have won this round, but the battle is far from over." With renewed vigor, Karen continued her investigation, determined to uncover any weaknesses or vulnerabilities that she could leverage to her advantage. This was her community, her domain, and she would do whatever it took to maintain control.